This is a new level of disgusting. Donald Trump came out to hold a press conference after the devastating plane crash at DCA at Reagan Airport here in DC, just a little bit down the road. And what did Trump decide to use this press conference for? Trying to cast blame on Pete Buttigieg and Biden. Now, today I had seen all the stuff floating around social media and sort of connecting Trump, which is, I guess, why he's coming out and saying this. Sort of actions he's already taken and FAA policy that could have contributed. Y'all know me, right after such a tragedy, I'm really sensitive to do any of the blaming type of stuff, but because he's making these allegations, I'll show you what people are talking about, which tells a very different story than what Trump's about to tell. But first, the news I'm sure you've all heard about, CNN reporting that no one's believed to have survived the midair collision between American Airlines jet plane and a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter last night in the Washington, D.C. area. The fire chief said, he quotes Trump, but I have no interest in doing that. Emergency authorities have switched to recovery effort after 28 bodies have so far been found. So you had this collision, commercial flight coming into Reagan Airport and a Black Hawk military helicopter, and somehow they crashed, and now dozens and dozens of deaths still yet to be fully confirmed. But as you heard there, it's shifted to just recovery and not rescue. And I don't get it. I really don't. It honestly can make me tear up or want to scream. I don't get how you see this and say, let's start doing this, what you're about to watch Trump do, but let's go through. If you do appreciate the show, please do click the subscribe button as we walk through this.
We do not know what led to this crash, but we have some very strong opinions and ideas, and I think we'll probably state those opinions now. Because over the years I've watched as things like this happen, and they say, well, we're always investigating, and then the investigation 3 years later, they announce it. We think we have some pretty good ideas.
So there are reasonable reasons to say, did some of Trump's active public gutting of the federal workforce and specifically FAA changes have any impact? It's reasonable to bring that up, not in a let's quickly jump to conclusions type of way, but just as you start trying to understand. But even though what I'm going to show you is really legitimate stuff, still there's a discomfort I had. And so I wasn't going to talk about that today, but now Trump's deciding to say this.
Then I came in, and I assume maybe this is the reason. The FAA, which is overseen by Secretary Pete Buttigieg, a real winner. That guy's a real winner. Do you know how badly everything's run since he's run this Department of Transportation? He's a disaster. He was a disaster as a mayor. He ran his city into the ground, and he's a disaster now. He's just got a good line of bullshit.
Right now, right down the street, dead bodies are literally being recovered. Families waiting to hear, was this the flight that my loved one was on? And he's talking about Pete Buttigieg's bullshit and lying. So, do you remember East Palestine? They tried to blame on Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. And then when we looked into it, the deregulative policy of Republican administrations in times gone by, Trump's administration, very well could have contributed. But I didn't say we knew that for certain, but we knew that it's actually often the Republicans wanting to deregulate these industries, making the protections for communities less safe in the name of deregulation. Trump proudly says that. Deregulation. Oh, we're going to slash as many as possible. And then that was a more reasonable explanation if someone's going to politicize it. But they tried to make it about Buttigieg. Now Buttigieg is not the transportation secretary, and they're still going to try to blame it on him. And so with this, I see why people jump into action going, all right, if MAGA's going to play that game, we're going to bring forward legitimate reports about Trump's new administration. Here's more.
Mr. President, on DEI and the claims that you've made, are you saying this crash was somehow caused and the result of diversity hiring? And what evidence have you seen to support these claims?
It just could have been. We have a high standard. We've had a much higher standard than anybody else. And there are things where you have to go by brain power. You have to go by psych.
Yeah, he's just sort of pulling stuff out of his rear end. Why? You don't have to do that unless you're Trump, and everything has to be a political attack. Even when, in this case, they've been doing that with the wildfires, and at least Democrats really are the ones overseeing the response. So it stands to reason any mistakes in the response in some way could be, quote unquote, blamed on them in California, even if Trump lies about the extent. Here, that doesn't make any sense. The Associated Press reports Trump fires heads of TSA, Coast Guard, and GUT's Key Aviation Safety Advisory Committee in his move to remake the Department of Homeland Security and Transportation Security Administration and Coast Guard. And FAA administrator quit on January 20th after Elon Musk told him to resign. And you have Thomas Schaller saying, an FAA employee, and this was posted before this crash happened, I know confirms agency already lacks sufficient air traffic controllers. The so-called buyouts and other attacks on federal employees won't help. Remember that fact when the flight delays or crashes commence and Trumpers start falsely blaming DEI or Biden. This was posted like in the morning, long before this crash. And it goes on, but the point is, there's a public acknowledgement up until this point by the Trump administration that they're gutting all of these institutions. And we've been hearing reports about it's chaos in all of these different organizations within our government. It's chaos. They don't know what's going on because all these people are being pushed out. Loyalists are being pushed in who aren't qualified and who may not know exactly what they're doing. And now there's missing leadership positions and there's, oh, we'll pay you if you'll get out, but you have to resign by this day. And again, I'm willing to sit and first only speak of the tragedy, let the process play out. And then if we want to discuss the politics of it, we ultimately do it, but not jump right into that discussion every time when there's a lot that's unknown. But Trump insists on doing that.
Christopher, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We must have only the highest standards for those who work in our aviation system. I changed the Obama standards from very mediocre at best to extraordinary. You remember that. Only the highest aptitude, they have to be the highest intellect and psychologically superior people were allowed to qualify for air traffic controllers. That was not so prior to getting there. When I arrived in 2016, I made that change very early on because I always felt this was a job that, and other jobs too, but this was a job that had to be superior intelligence, and we didn't really have that, and we had it. And then when
so he's just trying to desperately say, I've been doing everything perfectly. And it forces us, it really does, to dive more into the receipts. You have Ken Klippenstein having a pilot write into him saying, I've been disturbed by the operation of contract towers ever since becoming a pilot. During the first Trump administration, I feared what privatization of all air traffic control would bring. After Trump posted about ATC being at fault in last night's mid-air collision in DC, I'm concerned they will use this as a springboard to push for more private towers. I write this to you to say that this will bring more safety risks, and more people need to understand a real-life example of what chaos a contract tower can create when put in such busy and complicated airspace. And it's not absurd or an overtly political point to say we have heard overwhelmingly, even self-admittedly, from the Trump administration that they're clearing out the career civil servants. What does that mean? People who have long been qualifying themselves and working in these positions, they understand them in and out. Even with the long-standing problems, you're not going to make them better when you start acting in that way. But we don't know what directly caused this. There clearly was some sort of coordination problem. But just to refute what he's saying because he's desperate to make it so political.
And I think I can emphasize stronger, I changed it when I first ran in 2016. I changed it. We had the highest standard that you could have. And then they changed it back. That was Biden to a standard I read it to you. That was from one of your papers. One of the people in this room actually wrote that. And then I changed it back a few days ago. And unfortunately, that was...
So he's just sort of trying to filibuster, say a bunch of words, instead of delivering what we deserve from a president in a moment where we're experiencing what is expected to be the worst plane crash in the United States since 9/11. And what is he doing? He's talking about Pete Buttigieg's bullshit. He's blaming the past administration for something that, if we're going to immediately discuss direct policy impact on such a crisis, Trump's actions with the FAA and other related organizations would be the first ones we'd look to. He is having a first week and a half of his presidency that is hasty, that is unorganized, that is replacing people at a rate we've never seen. Some illegally, he's firing people who legally he's not supposed to be able to fire like that. And so I guess he feels insecure about that. And so he makes it about Pete Buttigieg and Biden. And they're the ones who gutted out. Now, I'm willing to acknowledge, it's something I've been ranting about since before Trump got into office, how messed up more broadly the airport and airline process is. The fact that we're the wealthiest country on the planet and have all these technological marvels, but we can't figure out how to organize this better, even just in a convenient sense, not to mention preventing horrific tragedies. One thing I didn't mention in all of this is the Pete Hegseth. Can you imagine if Biden had just put his folks into these positions of power and then something like this happened? You know what MAGA would be saying. Because we're hearing them say it now, even though this isn't Biden. And it's really depraved. But Hegseth is now the Department of Defense Secretary, and there was a military plane involved. But all of this should not be the nature of the discussion, but now we're forced into it because Trump has some insecurity, so he's trying to save face. Share your thoughts in the comments.